Coming up on the latest edition of the Next Man Up podcast on the Press Play Podcast Network, Kenny Rhoda and I talk, of course, about COVID-19, the novel coronavirus, and we also talk about what is happening or most, prevalent not happening in the sports world. Welcome to the latest edition of the Next Man Up podcast on the Press Play Podcast Network, brought to you by producer, director extraordinaire Chase Smith. I'm Dennis Maniloff, along with Kenny, the Roadman Rhoda. Roadman, it's been a while since we gathered for the pod. I've missed you, no doubt about it. But certainly since the last time we spoke, the world has been turned upside down with COVID-19. The pandemic truly has smashed into the United States in the past several weeks. And, everything is an upheaval. We got to start this pod by just, talking about it, of course, and then we'll go into how things are, what things are happening and not happening regarding the Browns, Indians, and Cavs. Roadman, your thoughts about where you sit right now as a human being, given what has happened with the COVID-19 pandemic?
Yeah, puts everything into perspective, doesn't it, D-Man? I mean, we get all riled up and ticked off and excited about sports and everything, and then something that really matters, life, happens like this. It's been tough. My show for the last, 2+ weeks now on WHBC, I've been doing it from my home studio. We've got a Comrec set up where I'm able to do my part of the show from home. JT's now able to do his part of the show from home. And we're still doing our show Monday through Friday, 3:30 to 6 p.m. on 1480 WHBC. And part of the topic is, COVID-19. And Ohio Governor Mike DeWine, I think, has just done a phenomenal job being proactive, aggressive, more so than the federal government, out in front of things and doing the best to keep Ohio in the best possible position it can be in a situation like this. Dr. Amy Acton, is there a bigger rock star in Ohio right now than Dr. Amy Acton and the job she and her teammates are doing? So it's been tough. I'm a germaphobe to begin with. So I've got the disinfectant wipes. I've got the antibacterial soap. I did wear the mask when I go shopping now. I ain't playing around with this, D-Man. I ain't taking any chances. I'm 56, so I'm in that upper echelon where, if you contract this, it might be more damaging to you. So I'm doing everything they're asking me to do. Social distancing. I'm quarantined at home, doing my show, and I only go out when I need to, and hopefully sometime in the not too distant future we get some answers to the coronavirus.
Yeah, that's what's so horrible about this whole situation is there are a lot of moving parts, and the virus is so insidious. You have situations where people are asymptomatic for days, multiple days. So it's hard to track. It's hard to know exactly who has it, who doesn't. There is a wide variance of symptoms. We have been able to know that the vast majority of the symptoms have been reasonable to mild, but don't tell that to any of the families who have lost loved ones because of it. And you've been seeing and hearing of the harrowing stories of people who felt like they were on death's door because they could barely breathe. So it's really a difficult situation because we don't really know when the quote unquote, back end of this. I won't even say the end is going to come, because I don't think there ever will be an end. I think this virus has been introduced into the world and will not leave it. But the question is, when are you going to be able to contain it enough to get on with some semblance of normalcy? And I don't think we're anywhere close to that right now. I wish I could say we were, regardless of what models saying, oh, the peak in the middle of April or whatever. Because here's the thing, like you said, Ohio has been proactive and one of the leaders, but it comes at a tremendous cost. The economy being wrecked is not something that you can just pass off and say, well, the economy got wrecked, but it got wrecked because it had to be wrecked. There are casualties in an economy that goes in the sewer. And so that doesn't mean by any stretch that you downplay what's happening with COVID-19. It just means that there are very real losses on the economic side. And what I've wondered about COVID-19, and I'll say it straight up, I was affected because I got laid off or furloughed from my WTAM duties the other day. That was one of the cost-cutting measures that was enacted by iHeart. I don't think I'm speaking out of school. It's not like it was a confidential situation. And so I lost that gig for the time being indefinitely. I'd like to think it'll come back. I'll be able to, be back at it again, but who knows? I don't know if the dynamic's going to change enough or if there's enough for the advertisers that'll come back to iHeart. And I certainly hope so. And I pray so because I've enjoyed it. And for other people too, not just me. But the point being is that before I was laid off, I was on some of the shows and I was saying that there's going to come a day, and we don't know when it is, when the economic entity is going to smash into the healthcare entity. And those two, imagine them as two big, wrecking balls. And they're both going to be swinging and they're going to hit each other because the economy ball is going to say, we can't be bottled up anymore. We can't be shut down anymore. We can't take on any more million job losses, while the healthcare ball is going to say, well, you're going to have to wait. 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 And when that day comes where those two balls truly hit each other, I don't know who's going to make the call about reassimilation and trying to get back to a new normal, or we're going to delay it that much further and side with the healthcare department.
Dr. Anthony Fauci is the name that I'll throw out there for people. If there's one voice I've listened to more than anybody else, it's Dr. Anthony Fauci, because this is what he does for a living: infectious diseases. It is his area of expertise, and I understand the economic side you're talking about, D-Man, and it is. I had some Monsters games I lost because no Monsters. All the sports are shut down now, so that there's money coming out of my pocket. And at the radio station, like I said, with JT, we're still doing our show, but how long will that continue if the advertisers aren't coming in and laying down some money? So I get that. I get it 100%. But for me, the voice of reason, the guy I'm listening to is Dr. Anthony Fauci. And when he says, hey, okay, it's good to start moving people back into the workplace, maybe in specific states, cities, and areas where we've seen the downslope, flattening the curve instead of the peak. They're saying the peak hasn't happened yet with COVID-19. And within the next 2 weeks, we may see that. And hopefully, once that happens, it won't be too catastrophic, but then we will start to see that downward slope and flattening of the curve. And I think in Ohio, they've done a great job of making strides in keeping the hospitals as free to patients who really need it as possible. And that's why they're asking everybody to self-quarantine at home, stay home, do all the social distancing and that, so we don't overwhelm our health workers, our doctors, our nurses, the nurses' assistants, the first responders with people with this virus, and all of a sudden the hospitals are overflowing, and what do you do next? So yeah, this is something we've never been through, D-Man. We normally talk sports. We normally get on here and bitch about Freddie Kitchens making stupid play calls, and John Beeline getting fired, and is JB Bickerstaff the right guy, and that's not life or death stuff. This is. So, we've got to hope that our leaders know what they're doing and you can pick and choose as to who you want to believe or listen to based on that.
Yeah, Roadman, and let me make it perfectly clear. I do believe that social physical distancing is of the utmost importance. I believe that this upcoming month of April is going to be devastating. I pray it is the worst of the worst. I pray this is going to. I wish it were gone tomorrow, right now, actually. But my sense is April is going to be very, very, very difficult to deal with. Now, beyond April, who knows? Because, like you say, models vary from expert to expert and projection to projection. But most of the credible people I've read and listened to have said that April is not going to be pretty at all. So, my prayers and thoughts go out to everybody in the world, certainly in the United States, certainly the first responders. I think most of us, sooner than later, if we haven't already, are going to know someone who is either tested positive or know someone who tested positive. And in my case, I have two friends who have daughters who are nurses, and they're understandably nervous, and I can't even imagine how hard their jobs are. First of all, just being a nurse in a vacuum, or just being a doctor in pristine conditions, is hard enough. Now you throw in the actual nurses and doctors and physicians assistants and all those other people that work in these emergency rooms and hospitals. They have to do their jobs at a high level, and they have to worry about protecting themselves. And we are noticing, way too many healthcare workers are getting sick because, of lack of protection and all sorts of other things. So I can't even fathom what's going through the minds of my two friends' daughters as they go out and do their jobs and are expected to be on point basically 12 to 15 hours a day, 6 to 7 days a week. You're supposed to be sharp all the way through. You're supposed to be able to treat patients. The more you think about it, the more information you take in, the more problematic I think it can be for your brain, because you say, well, my goodness, this is unbelievable to even contemplate. I mean, you talk about making as many ventilators as you want as one example. But I was watching today on the news where you've got to have people who know how to operate the ventilators. You can't just say, well, we're going to make 30,000 ventilators for X number of states or X number of hospitals. You've got to have people who know how to use them. So there's so many elements to this, so many tentacles, that it can scare you into a corner and make you just shudder when you really think about how devastating this has been so far and probably will continue to be. So, I don't know.
D-Man, I'm going to interject here. My girlfriend's a nurse's assistant. She just did a 4-hour shift today.
Okay.
So every time
how are you doing with her then? What is your situation with her? You guys keeping your distance, or do you guys get together?
Here's what we do. I worry about her every day that she has to work at the hospital, and she's smart enough to do whatever she can to take all precautions. And then when she comes home, before she comes in, it's the nurse's assistant uniform off in a bag. Spray the bottom of the shoes with Lysol, leave the jacket out in the garage, and then immediately go take a shower and throw everything in the laundry and do that. Because you don't want to bring that into your home, and people forget about your shoes. Especially if you're in a hospital, you're walking around a hospital where people are coughing and talking all the time. That's on the floor. You walk in it, and this is supposed to be able to survive up to, I think it's 3 days potentially on the coronavirus on plastic or the bottom of your shoes, 24 hours on cardboard. So you want to keep it from getting into your home any way you can. So we take all precautions with that, and just keep our fingers crossed that she doesn't come across a patient or a coworker who's got the COVID-19, because it's transmitted with the droplets in the air if you're standing close by somebody. And in the hospital, when you're working with a patient, social distancing is tough. You have to hope that that person has either been screened and tested negative, or you keep your distance just in case they haven't been screened, in case they are, someone who's carrying the coronavirus. So it's tough to deal with, to be honest with you, D-Man. And we're doing our best to keep our distances, but still trying to live a normal life.
Yeah, Roadman. I mean, it's so complex these days. If you take the physical distancing seriously, which I do, which you do, which Chase does, which any rational person at this stage must do. But as I said, there's so many really fascinating elements to this whole COVID-19 outbreak, and one of them is the state versus state element. And you never thought that you would have one state spot checking entries to its state from based on license plates, and telling a license plate coming from a coronavirus hot spot to go to the right side and be checked. I mean, here's the thing though. I don't blame one bit a state such as Ohio that has been proactive, that has taken a lot of, drastic steps, has really blown up its economy in the short term. I don't blame that kind of a state for saying, you know what? We've made a lot of sacrifices to this point. We're not really in the mood to have a state, such as Louisiana, not to knock Louisianans, but the fact of the matter is they're not doing anything near proactively what we are in Ohio. I don't necessarily want you coming into my state. And that's what this COVID-19 virus situation has done, because, and I recognize this at the beginning of the outbreak in this country, states have a lot of power. They truly do, under the framers of the Constitution. And this is one of those cases where a state can take ownership of a lot. It doesn't mean that it can overrule a national government dictum. It doesn't mean that you don't want help from the national government. Of course you do. But this is one of those situations where a state can flex its muscle or impose its will. And as a result, it can, build a figurative cocoon around its borders and say, hey, just because you guys over here aren't doing it the way we're doing, we don't want you coming in here. And that I've never experienced in my life, where you have potential tension, state versus state kind of tension. And, and then you have the national government on top of that. So it's a multi-layered, potentially predicament as we go forward.
Yeah, and here let's throw some maybe positive news, D-Man, as we wrap up this coronavirus talk and get into a few of the sports things that are going on or went on while we talked last. I saw a story here. Johnson & Johnson said on Monday that it and the U.S. government will invest $1 billion with a B, $1 billion to create enough manufacturing capacity to make more than 1 billion doses of a vaccine it is testing to stop the new coronavirus that has killed more than 35,000 people around the world. So they're hopefully making strides on something that will either slow the spread if you get it, help you, give you a better chance of surviving whatever this is. It's, not been proven yet, but they're going to test it, and at the same time think that it's going to work and make these, doses of it, in hopes that if it indeed does work, then they're already, made to be able to, send out to, not everybody, or I should say, to people in the U.S., but also throughout the world. So let's keep our fingers crossed with that. And let's also hope that we get more tests. That's the biggest thing. There aren't enough tests for everybody. More people should be getting tested, and they can't because there aren't enough tests. Hopefully, more of these tests will be made available here in the United States as well.
You're right. And Roadman, you're right. And we are all Americans here. We're all citizens of the world. So we pray for everybody, and we're all on the same team trying to defeat this virus, or at least mitigate it to the point where we can try to get back to a new normal. But as you said, sports is definitely on the plate with you and me, no matter what. And granted, sports has ground to a halt in a lot of senses, but one sport that has continued to move because the timing of the COVID-19 outbreak did not affect its regular season is the NFL. Didn't affect its postseason either. The NFL is able to do business, has done business, had the free agent frenzy, had the trading that has gone on. The draft will go on, with remotely. Obviously, I'm glad that this wasn't the year that it was in Cleveland. Sorry, Vegas. But the draft will go on, and free agency has already gone on. So with that in mind, Roadman, as you looked at what the Browns have done and not done in terms of free agency and trades in the last month, basically since we spoke last, what have you thought about what the Browns have done in those areas, free agency and trades?
I was a little surprised that Austin Hooper was the first name that popped up free agency wise for the Cleveland Browns with Andrew Berry and his staff. They lock him up, the tight end, to a 4-year deal. I think $23 million guaranteed, over $40 million overall. But Jack Conklin, I thought, was a very good signing. They need a right tackle. They need a left tackle, the Browns. So they go out and they get the best right tackle in the draft. Let's just hope this right tackle and Jack Conklin is better than the last right tackle they signed in free agency, Chris Hubbard, who has proved to be more of a backup and a swing guy than a starting right tackle in the NFL. So Hooper, Conklin, and the Keenum one was a little surprising to me, and they guaranteed him $10 million in his 3-year contract. But that gives them a veteran backup quarterback in case something happens to Baker Mayfield. It gives them a veteran quarterback to talk and maybe mentor Baker Mayfield, and it gives them a veteran quarterback that if Baker stinks it up again, you've got a guy who knows the offense that Stefanski wants to run, right? And you could plug him in and play him if you had to, if Baker continues to struggle. So those three were the big 3 free agent signings, and then they traded for Andy Janovich, the fullback, which I think we kind of figured was going to happen because of the Stefanski offense. So those moves to me all make sense on the offensive side of the ball. The other signings, Carl Joseph, Billings, Johnson, JoJo Nats, some of these other guys, to me, they're more depth guys. Those 4, Conklin, Keenan, Hooper in free agency, and Janovich in a trade, I think were all a necessity for the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, I'll throw B.J. Goodson in there too, as a guy who might be more than depth because they do lose mighty Joe Schobert. I don't blame the Browns for not re-signing Schobert at the price that he eventually went to. Jaguars, Jacksonville. Right. I mean, that's just too rich for my blood when you're averaging 10.5 to 11 million a year. For Joe Schobert, I think you're overpaying, but good for Joe. He earned it, as it were. So happy for him. Overall, I've cautioned Browns fans, don't get too wrapped up in free agency. It's not meant to be the elixir. It's not meant to be the fixer. If you as an organization rely on free agency to carry you to glory, then you are going to be disappointed. It is a piece of the puzzle, but it's not by any means the whole part, or even 75% of the equation. And I think when you look at what the Browns did via free agency and the trades that kind of get lumped into free agency, I think they did take a relatively safe approach to free agency, as in did not dump a truckload of cash into one particular player. That's what you get nervous about when an organization goes haywire with a contract that just makes your eyes pop out of your head. Yes, Conklin is going to be well compensated. Yes, Keenum's getting his cash and whatnot, but you're not overpaying as far as I can. And who's the other one that's slipping my mind besides you mentioned
Austin Hooper?
Yeah, I mean Hooper's going to be handsomely paid, but it doesn't feel like you're throwing mad jack at some over the hill dude just because he's a name, and so that makes me feel good about what the Browns have done. But having said that, though, like I said, you can't get too excited about anybody's free agent class or free agent / trade class because you don't know. You don't know how they're going to perform in your uniform. You don't know how they're going to perform in your system with the new coaches. We shall see. But it's better to bring in a Hooper. It's better to bring in a Conklin than not. All right. And I think the Browns added more than they lost because, they did lose people and led by Schobert. Kirksey, of course, even though he was injured, quality player when he was on the field. And other guys, TJ Carey just signed with somebody today. So they've lost some people, but I think they gained more than they lost in terms of talent. So I'm happy for the Browns on that front. But I want to go to the Keenum thing because, as you mentioned, it wasn't long ago. You alluded to this. 2017, I believe, was the year when Case Keenum was playing for the Minnesota Vikings and Kevin Stefanski was in the mix there in the coaching staff situation. I don't know what his exact role was at that point, but it was, he had a hand in what was going on, and he got an up-close look at a very good season for Case Keenum as a Minnesota Viking. And indeed, hit the best season of his NFL career. So, and I want to say he parlayed that into money in Denver. But the bottom line is Keenum was good for the Vikings in 17, and that gives you hope as a Browns fan that if something were to go wrong with the Bake Show, your season is not over. Because if I'm an NFL team, one of the things I want to do is go into a season with a backup that is capable of winning games. And you say, well, that's obvious. Well, not really, because in some cases, the backup quarterback, if he has to play, you're finished. And honestly, no disrespect. Maybe I'm disrespecting him just by saying that. Drew Stanton was one of those guys where if he had to play, the Browns were going nowhere. They had now, admittedly, 6-10 last year. But my feeling was if Stanton had to play, you're cooked. With Keenum, I'm not going to think that way. I'm going to think, you know what? If Keenum has to play, if Mayfield is dinged or if he, God forbid, breaks something or whatever, the Browns still have a chance to win games. That's, to me, what an organization needs to do, provide a viable backup. And it's not easy to do because you have to get a player in here who is willing to subjugate. You have to get a player in who has talent and he's willing to subjugate his ego and his pride and say, yeah, okay, I will play behind this guy. I'll be ready to go if needed, but I know my role. My role is not to beat out Baker Mayfield and cause a quarterback controversy. My role is to be ready to go if he can't go. And so I'm encouraged by the upgrade at backup quarterback by the Cleveland Browns.
I like the move. I think Baker, we've heard him say before, I was looking up some things here, every time he has a chip on his shoulder, he plays better. Well, maybe this is a little push for him. Did you see his video? I was just looking at this too on Instagram, with his shirt off and he's working out and look at me, Arnold Schwarzenegger, the quarterback of the Cleveland Browns, and he's all ripped and everything. And he realizes, I think last year he got a little plump. The Pillsbury Doughboy a little bit and did too much of the commercial thing along with the marriage honeymoon commercial and not working out thing last year. So it's good to see that maybe this is something that will light a fire under him, along with his last pass of the season for the second year in a row being an interception and the 6-10 record. And all of that. So hopefully this will be something that adds to that boulder that's on his shoulder that for whatever reason seems to make him play better at whatever level he's playing, D-Man.
Roadman, we'll kick it out to the National Football League in general. What was your reaction to one Mr. Thomas Brady leaving the nest in Foxborough and not only leaving the nest in Foxborough, but joining the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? I'm
wondering if Bruce Arians is going to have to cheat now, like Bill Belichick did when Tom Brady was in New England. Is Arians going to throw his scruples out the window because now he's got TB12 and the deflating balls or whatever they got to do to try and? I could care less, to be perfectly honest with you, D-Man. I'm sick of Brady. He's 42.
Wow.
His better years are behind him. Go home to your Brazilian, multi-gazillionaire wife and enjoy life on some island, dude. Come on, man. You got 6 Super Bowl wins, 9 Super Bowl appearances, arguably the GOAT. So go retire, man. I didn't care where he went, to be perfectly honest. Yeah, as a Steeler fan, great. He's out of New England, good. But you know what? I don't think he's anywhere near what he was 5 years ago, and he's facing Father Time a little bit more face to face, closer now. So whatever, overblown situation.
Wow.
The hell with Tom Brady. That's how I feel.
I did not anticipate that. I thought I was teeing up a little fluff ball for the Roadman. I differ with you on that. I love Tom Brady. I like watching him play.
Peter.
I want to see him continue. I'm fascinated by it on many levels, so I apologize for the next couple of minutes or 2 minutes.
That's all right. You can talk about all you want, D-Man.
Listen, I did think that Brady was moving on when it reached a certain point after the season where he had not, re-upped with the Patriots. I thought it was time or that he was going. Question was where. I didn't anticipate it would be Tampa Bay, but the more you look at it, the more you think, okay, that offense is ready-made to rumble. Not that Winston was terrible for them, because Winston did put up 30 TDs, admittedly 30 picks along with it. But, that offense with Arians, it could be interesting. Brady might find a new energy, if you will, given that he's going to.
I hope he gets smashed. I hope he ends up 6-10 like the Browns were last year, and then the debate will rage on who needed who more. Did Brady need Belichick, or did Belichick need Brady?
I was going to say, you and privately Bill Belichick, Belichick is privately wishing that Brady falls on his face.
Yes.
Regardless of what Belichick said publicly, which he was supposed to say, by the way. Hey, Tom was the man. He was amazing. He's the best ever, all that stuff. But privately, the grinder and the competitor that Belichick is, he wants Brady to fall flat, because here's the thing. Belichick wanted Brady out of there a few years ago. He was like you, Kenny. He was like, hey, Brady, why don't you ride off into the sunset so I can install my man Garoppolo as your replacement? Well, guess what? Brady stuck around and said, I'm going to keep playing here because, Robert Kraft is my guy and I'm the man. And Belichick was like, okay. And they even won a Super Bowl with Belichick kind of wishing to some extent that Brady wasn't there. They still won a Super Bowl with him, in the Rams, over the Rams. So Belichick has probably mentally moved on from Brady for several years. And now he's finally rid of him. The weird part now, though, is Garoppolo's in San Fran.
Right.
Stidham right now is his number one guy. Who knows what he has up his sleeve?
What do you mean he's their number one guy? Brian Hoyer's their number one guy.
That's right.
They brought back the winningest quarterback since the Browns have returned to Cleveland in Browns history since 1999. Brian Hoyer's going to give Stidham all he can handle to be that starting quarterback with the New England Patriots. How crazy would it be if indeed they don't win a Super Bowl, but Hoyer takes them one step further than Brady did last year? Belichick, like you said, he won't admit that publicly, but he would love to see that happen.
Yeah, and what's interesting on the NFL landscape as pertains to the quarterback position, and given that New England, assuming they don't want to ride with Hoyer as their number one guy, there are two fascinating names out there, Cam Newton and Jameis Winston. And the question is, if you're a Winston or a Newton, do you want to go to New England and play for Bill Belichick? Now you say, well, how could you ask that question? Why wouldn't you want to play for the greatest coach of all time? Listen, he's not for everybody, okay? And especially if you're a quarterback and you're following Tom Brady and you're a big name, you've been a big name somewhere else. You've been an MVP, as was the case with Cam Newton in Carolina. You've been a prolific passer at times in Tampa Bay. If you're Jameis Winston, now you want to come play in the shadow of Thomas Brady for a guy, Bill Belichick, who is ornery when he wakes up, ornery when he eats lunch, ornery when he goes to bed. I don't know. Maybe if you're an impressionable rookie, you'll be like, oh, yeah, I want to play for Bill Belichick. But if you're a guy who's established some credentials in the league at the quarterback position and you're following Brady and you're playing for Belichick, I don't know that that's necessarily something you want to dive into. And that's why I think that Newton and Winston, to this point at least, or Winston, have said no, or it hasn't worked out with either one of those two guys going to New England.
All right, is that enough on Belichick and Brady? Okay.
All right, I had to get that off my chest.
I know you. I can tell, man. You wanted to get it out there. That's fine. The NFL draft. Do you think it happens the 23rd through the 25th? You think they're holding steady on that, and they're going to do it in a special way where players are going to be involved? Yeah. You know what? The more I hear of it, it's still 3 weeks away, but it seems like they want to operate as close to normal as possible, meaning at least holding the draft. But I know the GMs and people that I've talked to, D-Man, they're hoping they postpone this thing because everybody can't get together like they normally do with their draft boards in the same room because of social distancing, and they don't want to break any rules. So it'll be interesting to see if Roger Goodell, judge, jury, and executioner, make sure this thing goes down the 23rd through the 25th with some tweaks to it.
Yeah, and honestly, Roadman, if I were the NFL, recognizing what you just said, that the logistics are going to be a challenge doing it remotely, I would stretch it out over more days and have fewer rounds in a day, so that you have the first round one day, maybe the second round the second day, third and fourth round the third day. That way you give yourself time to have a kink along the way when it comes to the transmission of the pick or whatever it is. But I would just add days to it. Maybe it's too late in the game to do it now, but to me, if you're the NFL, you've got to try to stay on schedule as much as possible, because you are the only sport, as I can see, the only sport of any consequence that potentially could start its season on time.
Yeah.
The rest of them either had it interrupted or won't be able to start on time. But the NFL, given the way this thing broke, you got to hope, for the sake of our world and our economy and our lives, that by, July, things are somewhat back to normal. And therefore the NFL can look at a September schedule and say, you know what, we don't have to push it back. But if you push stuff back now, it could potentially trip over things as you head into the summer months. So I would stick with it, go with remote, stretch the days out a little bit and see if you can, or even if you don't add days, stretch the time out so people can have extra minutes to make their picks in case there's a snag.
Yeah. All right, D-Man. What, you want to talk some NBA? Because I was just reading a story where they might be holding off paying some of the players a percentage of their salary based on when this NBA situation might get, resolved, I guess, or I shouldn't say the NBA situation, the coronavirus situation gets resolved. They're talking about maybe playing August, September into October, D-Man, and not giving a damn whether the NFL is playing or not at that time because they think they can still get their fans to watch their game. What's your take on the NBA wanting to find a way to crown a champion this year, if at all possible?
I like it. I like it for both the NBA and the NHL. I think they should make every effort to finish what they started, recognizing that it might not be possible given what can happen in the world over the next couple of months. I mean, think about Toronto. Okay, the defending NBA champion Toronto Raptors, they play in a city that just banned public events, not necessarily sporting events, but for example, parades. Those were banned through, I believe, June. So you never know what's going to happen. You've got New York and New Jersey, or at least New York, ablaze in COVID-19. You're going to sit there and tell me that we have to worry about the New York Knicks or even the Nets nearby. You have various other areas that are affected worse than others in this country. So we don't know what's going to happen in the next few months. But having said that, I don't blame the NBA for trying to finish. I don't blame the NBA for extending this thing into the fall because they're looking and saying, well, look, we can finish in September. We'll have October off and we're back at it in November. As long as you don't adversely affect the following season. I've seen some proposals. We're going to delay the start of the 2021 season. No. To me, you're compounding it if you affect the following season. Try to finish the 1920 season as best you can. And if you can't because of the world events, because of the pandemic, then you can't. But at least keep it open and say, you know what, if we don't do it, at least we start fresh with the 2021 season, hopefully. Now, I saw, you said the thing about the pay. I just saw this. NBA working on coming up with plans to finish. According to the New York Post, could be a situation where all 30 teams finish out their games in a single arena without any fans present. That just came over my phone a couple hours ago via the iHeartRadio news service.
What are they going to do, like an AAU tournament where they just roll them in and play game after game after game and televise them, D-Man?
Listen, Roadman, the way I was looking, and to me, you should have all suggestions on the table. One of the things I was thinking of was along those lines. I would end the season the way it ended when play was suspended by virtue of the Rudy Gobert positive test. That is the end of the season in my mind, the end of the regular season. Whatever your seeds are, your seeds are. I don't want to hear anybody whining, I could have moved up or whatever. No, there were enough games were played in the season. You are what you are. You're either a 1 seed or you're an 8 seed. You're either a 2 or a 7. And as you look at both conferences, the number 9 seed in each conference is out, is at least 2.5 or 3 back. Right. So it's not some controversy like there was only a 1-game difference between making the playoffs and not. So what I do is I take the 8 teams from each conference and I have an NCAA tournament style playoffs. Now, you say, well, that's not what the NBA does. Well, you know what? The coronavirus isn't what the NBA does. Sorry. Yep. This year just happens to be an exception. A few years ago, the NBA played a strike-shortened season. Does anybody care? No. The champion, I believe, was the San Antonio Spurs. Nobody cared. They played a strike-shortened season. So in this case, when history looks back on it, if my proposal were to be enacted, which it probably won't be, but if my proposal were to be enacted, 10 years from now, nobody's going to care whether it was a single elimination tournament. They're just going to say who was the champion in 2020. And so I say if you're the number 1 seed in the East, which is Milwaukee by miles, and you're playing the number 8, which is a powder puff. I don't know who that is in the 8 spot, actually, but it's a junky team. It's sub 500. You should beat that team. I don't care where you play. The Bucks should beat the 8 seed, period.
Yeah.
Lakers, number 1 seed. You should beat the number 8 seed. I know it's tougher in the West, but tough and too bad. In a 1-game playoff, you should win if you're the top seed. So if you lose and you get upset, well, so be it. But to me, you play an NCAA-style finish, 1 game and you're out, and you do it at a neutral site, and you limit the amount of people in the building. You quarantine the players in the run-up to your tournament. You make sure they're all testing negative for 2 weeks before they take the court, and you limit the spectators, if any. You have the ushers or the security and some medical people, of course, and it's a made-for-TV deal. These are the times in which we live. You either have this or you don't, but, yeah, it's not the perfect solution, but I think it's something that would be definitely watched on television. And if you can't get fans in the stands, at least you can get television ratings and sell ads.
No, I'm with you on that. Something, if we're cleared to do this where the players are safe, because think about the investment these teams have made in these players, right, D-Man? That's why Adam Silver shut that thing down to begin with, and kudos to him because he started all the dominoes falling with all the sports. Because once the NBA did it, then March Madness was shut down and the other leagues shut down. So Adam Silver, well, we talk about Governor Mike DeWine being aggressive with coronavirus in the state of Ohio. Adam Silver was the most aggressive of all the sports commissioners out there. That's why he's the best, right now in all of sports. So they've got to protect these players. But if the players are given the clearance by the medical personnel to say, okay, yes, we can do this. We're going to test every player, everybody on the team, the doctors, the trainers, the coaches, and y'all are negative, and we're going to put you, in hotels or what. If they're willing to do that, give us the NBA then. If we can get that at whatever time of the year that is, whether that's July, August, September. I understand your point about not wanting to go into next season. That is completely understandable. But what do you do with the draft, D-Man? We know who the lottery teams will be, right? But the rest of the draft is based on where they finish, isn't it? In the playoffs. So that could affect, teams 16 through 30 or whatever it is. So that's the only thing where it does affect next season if they try and do something like this and it doesn't happen till July, August, September, because we're supposed to have the draft lottery coming up here in not too long of a time. And then, the draft usually happens in June for next season. So there are some, wrenches that have been thrown into this if that's their plan.
There's no doubt, Roadman, but here's my point, though. Number one, the NBA season has played the majority of its schedule. In other words, more than 41 games. Okay, everybody's played more than 50% of the schedule. So I'm okay with ending a season if you've played more than 50% of the schedule. And what you said about the draft is another reason why I think they should end the regular season the way it ended before the COVID outbreak, because if you wait, we know you're going to wait at least through April, probably through May. Well, now all of a sudden, what are you going to try to do? Delay the draft because you have to finish the regular season? I mean, no, I wouldn't. I'd just say this is the draft order because of a global pandemic. Sorry.
Okay.
If you felt like you could improve your draft position in the final 30 games of the year, well, that's all tough. And it might not have even been 30. What was the Cavs record at this? I thought they played around 60, didn't they?
Cavaliers were 19 and 46. So they played 65 games. They had 17 games left.
Right. It's not even right. I shouldn't have I shouldn't have even said 51%. I mean,
Yeah,
we're up around
yeah.
75% of the season is done. What's the point of finishing the final 25 or 20%? I mean, what really? Keep the draft where it is, keep everything
Okay.
else where it is, end the season, seed them right away. And here's the other thing, Roadman. I've always said the NBA playoffs, given the 3 best of 7s just to get to the finals, is a very difficult road. And yeah, it is part of the allure because the NHL does the same thing. You say, well, the Stanley Cup champion is well deserved because that Stanley Cup champ had to go through 3 best of 7s to get to the finals. And then you got to win a 4th best of 7 to win the title, to win the cup. Same in the NBA. But what, given what we're going through, again, this is the exception of all exceptions, a global pandemic.
Right.
What is wrong with 1 year where you actually do invoke an NCAA tournament style? And oh, by the way, it was a year when the NCAA tournament was scrapped. So you're playing in the same calendar year as when the NBA, when the March Madness was gone. Give us professional March Madness in July or August, and let's have some fun. And you do then have the pressure that a Lakers would feel or a Bucks would feel because they're going to have to win. Right, there's no wiggle room. They can't give up a game like last year. First series for the Toronto Raptors, they lost their opening game to the Orlando Magic at home. Kawhi and the boys lost to the Magic in Toronto. Right. Well, you know what? If you lose this year, you're out.
Okay.
So right. I don't know. I mean, that's I in the interest of trying to save the season, I'd rather do that than nothing.
All right, let's get to baseball real quick here before we wrap things up. All right, D-Man, we did the NFL and the Browns. We talked some NBA there. The Indians. Man, you know what? I was out in spring training. JT and I did our shows from there. And this was, the coronavirus was a topic. And I'm flying, and I didn't wear my mask. I had a mask. And I'm like, well, I wish I would have. Worn it, and I wear it now wherever I go in public where there's a lot of people. But thinking about being in a clubhouse with players from all over the world coming right to spring training, and this pandemic that we're dealing with here. Major League Baseball took them a little bit longer, but they did the right thing. It's going to be interesting to see how MLB handles this coronavirus with their season. I know they want to try and get in as many games as possible if they can get any games in at all. But the Indians could be affected by this in 2 ways. Number one, you lose this season, but then they're saying that Francisco Lindor could get a year under his belt, which would mean he's 1 year closer to free agency, and you don't get him this year to play to give you a chance maybe to win that elusive World Series that they haven't won since 1948. So to me, this right now is kind of a lose-lose situation for the Indians. If there's no season, that means you don't get to play this year, and you're 1 year closer to losing Francisco Lindor in free agency.
Yeah, Roadman, and they're not just saying it. I believe that's been agreed upon.
Okay.
The players and the owners. Of course, the players were going to agree to that because it's a year of service time for everybody other than the elite prospects. And yeah, it puts Frankie Lindor one step closer to free agency. And if this season were to be blown up and there were no season, and you're down to 1 year of Frankie control, and the odds are very good that the Indians would move him in the off season. So it's possible. I don't want to say it, but I'm going to say it. It's possible we've seen the last of Frankie in an Indians uniform. I hope that's only possible and not probable, because I hope the MLB is able to salvage the season. Now, in order to salvage a season, in my opinion, with integrity, and I mentioned this with the NBA, you have to play 51% of your games at least to feel like there's, reason that you can end it. in the MLB, when I look at 162 games, I think that you can't go below 100. And I know you say, well, that's an arbitrary number. 100 looks good on paper. No, I'm looking at the triple digit element of it. If you're going to play 162, you got to play a minimum of 100 for a season to have any kind of integrity. You can't sit there and say, well, we're going to play 75, okay? Or we're going to play 60 and play the World Series. If you can't get 100 games in at a minimum, then I don't think it's worth even playing the season.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, you wouldn't be okay with 80 games and break it. And here's my theory on this. If you could only get in 80 games, you break it down into like 240 game seasons. All right. I would go, if we're going to do that with the NBA and the possible March Madness format, D-Man, I'd do something like that for Major League Baseball as well, where, okay, you play 80 games, it goes a little bit longer, past when the regular season should go, but you somehow you break it into, 240 game seasons, and then you have neutral site indoor facilities for playoffs. So weather isn't a fact. I would be okay with doing something like that. If we could have at least 80 games for a Major League Baseball season.
Well, and okay, so you and I would be negotiating between 80 and 100 in that case.
Yeah.
And yeah, you say, well, why would I say majority, 50, simple majority NBA? Why wouldn't I say simple majority MLB? The reason is because the MLB is such a different animal with the 162. Nobody on the planet plays 162 games in its regular season. It is part of what makes baseball such a difficult sport to play and such a difficult sport to win, is that you are tasked with performing over a 6-month period in the regular season and then another month in the post. That length of season, to me, requires you to play more than just the 51% threshold because of how baseball is set up, because of the grind that it is. Rosters, pitching staffs, scouting, everything that goes into baseball goes into thinking of it as a 6-month marathon as opposed to a 2-month sprint. But that said, if you ask the players, 80 game season or 81, 82 game season or bust,
yeah,
they're going to say, let's go. Let's play 82.
Play. Yeah.
So if you were to tell me, hey, Dennis, your 100 is out the window, but 82 is on the table, give me 82 MLB and another month worth of playoffs and let's go.
Yeah,
but it is salvageable, but we're so far down the road right now that who knows?
Yeah, it's right now. We don't know, D-Man. That's the crazy thing about all of this. This could linger on for an extended period of time where, we may lose. Think about this, D-Man. We could go through 2020 without an NCAA champion, without an NBA champion, without an NHL champion. And if it drags into, the latter months of the year, no NFL or Major League Baseball champion. I mean, this has never happened before, and that's why this is, so to me, it's mind-boggling. It's like a movie. It's like we're living out a movie, and we're actors in the movie playing our part as we're hoping that somehow, some way, we come up with a cure, medication that helps the people who get coronavirus, a vaccine to keep you from getting it. I mean, this is real life. My son's in Brazil. I think how I feel. I've got a girlfriend who works at the hospital, and I've got my son who's in Brazil, who, in that country, the health system, I don't think it's as good as ours is. So, I'm FaceTiming him every chance I get and talking to him every chance I get to make sure he's doing okay over there. So while, we miss all of these sports we just talked about, most important thing is life. You get one chance at it, man. That's it. And so hopefully, everybody out there can stay safe, stay healthy. And, we can find a way to beat this coronavirus somehow, some way here in the not too distant future, so we can get back to life as normal.
Great way to wrap it up, Roadman. And my final point is there will be a new normal. It's not going to be the same as we were used to before this, but I pray that the solutions come fast and furious, and that as many people as possible, all people are protected. But unfortunately, we know that that's not realistic. But can we keep the losses to a minimum? Can we keep the sicknesses to a minimum? And I ask God to protect our healthcare workers and all our first responders and frontliners. And we recognize, of course, again, that sports pales in comparison to anything that's happening in the real world.
Yep.
And I hope for our sanity's sake that we can get back to a new normal sooner than later. But we don't know. We're beholden to a lot of things, a lot of unknown, and all we can do is just hope and pray.
Yeah, Chase, our producer extraordinaire, stay healthy with you and your family. D-Man, stay healthy with you and your family. And we'll do this again, and hopefully we can provide some, entertainment value for people out there to get your mind off coronavirus the next time we do our Next Man Up podcast. And I'll be bothering you to come on the radio show, D-Man, as long as we're doing it in Canton. I'll get you to join JT and I on WHBC. All right, bud?
All right, you no problem, Roadman, and thank you for tonight, and also best wishes to your girlfriend and your son.
Thanks so much, D-Man.
You got it, bud.